Howdy folks, and welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about window.location. You may know about the window object and it being a part of the JavaScript web API. Well, the .location property of the window object is a handy tool that allows us to do things programmatically related to navigation and other URL-related tasks. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. So, assuming you've done a little bit of web development and have run JavaScript code in the browser, it's highly likely that you've interacted with the window object before. If you've ever used an alert or confirm or done anything that starts with document, then that's all coming from the window object, and indeed you have used it before. It's just that with the JavaScript web API, you don't always have to say window.whatever. You can just say alert or prompt or confirm. The same is true with window.location. You can omit the window dot part, but in these examples, you will see me write window.location followed by whatever comes after that, just for the sake of clarity. Okay, let's have a look at an example. So we have a little example project here that I've put together. It's got 3 different HTML files which represent different pages. So let's just go ahead and open up the home page, the index.html, and just see what we're working with. Okay, we got the window.location demo. And we have a button here that says click here to navigate programmatically. Okay, I click it. Oh, and it opens a little countdown thing. Okay. And when the timer reaches 0, I am navigated away from index.html to the page2.html page. And it congratulates me on my amazing ability to navigate programmatically. And then I can click on this button that pretty much does the exact same thing, only it navigates me back to the index.html page. Okay, let's take a quick look at the code and see what's going on there. So the index.html, it's pretty straightforward. Here's the div where the button and the timer were that we just interacted with. Below that is a form, which we'll get into shortly. For now, let's just focus on what we just did with that timer and the button. All this is here is a div with an h2 that has no text at the moment and a button. So those 3 elements have class names, which we can access in the JavaScript. And so let's go ahead and look at that. And of course, the JavaScript is linked in down here, specifically the index.js. So if we open index.js, we see that this page has variables for the timer header that initially had no text, the timer button, the green button that we clicked on to navigate programmatically. And for now, those are the only 2 elements that we're really working with. So the timer button has a click event listener on it. We initialize a variable called time to 5, and then we display some text here using that variable saying navigating programmatically in, followed by the time. Then we start a set interval, and that runs every 1 second, and it decrements the time and redisplays that header. But then there's a conditional. If time equals 0, we stop the time interval, but then we finally have our use of window.location. The method we use here, .assign, is used to navigate. You can navigate anywhere with this. You can navigate to another page within your own project, or you can navigate to an external site. We used assign here. Assign is nice because it keeps a history for the user to, click the back button. In other words, the current page that they navigated away from remains in the history. If I had used replace instead of assign, it would not keep that history, and I'll demonstrate that. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this and go incognito so that I don't have a history here. And I'm at index.html. And if I use window.location.replace to get to page 2, and then click the back button, it skips past the home page. I don't have that home page in the history, and there isn't a button to navigate back other than this one here that does so programmatically. Okay, so that's the difference between assign and replace. Those are 2 commonly used navigation functions that window.location has. That's handy. So you see now that you can very simply navigate to different pages anywhere in your JavaScript code under any kind of special condition that you want to specify. Cool. Let's take a look at the rest of that page. So here I am back on the home page. And let's just see what happens if I type a couple words into these inputs that are in that form. I'll type surfing and I'll hit submit search. Whoa, I'm a new page, but I remember the words from the last page. And then they are here displayed. Search term 1, search term 2. So how did that happen? Here we are. We can see that we're on a new page. We're on search page.html. And then there are some query parameters after that in the URL. You might be familiar with query parameters very briefly. They begin with a question mark, and then they are a series of keys and values separated by an equal sign. And then each key value pair is separated by the ampersand. Whoops. Shown right there. So somehow these two terms that the user typed in got up there into the URL, which allowed us to get them on this entirely separate page that isn't linked into index.js. It has its own JavaScript file. So clearly I was able to somehow get those into the URL, and clearly I was able to somehow extract them from the URL and display them here. Let's have a look at the code. So back on our index.js file, the JS for the home page, if we scroll down, we have the event listener for that form. And real quickly, it grabs the user input from the two inputs that were there. And then what we do is we use them just to concatenate them into the URL, into the query parameters section. We've just manually added the question mark and the search term 1 equals search term 2 equals. So that's how that works. That's how we get them into the query parameters. So you may have noticed that I said that this is an unencoded way of putting these strings into the query parameters. So let me show you what that means. We're just inserting the raw string from the user. But if for some reason the user wanted to search for dot ampersand ampersand ampersand, and then wanted to look for ampersand surfing, what would happen? Whoa, search term 1 is just dot, and then search term 2 doesn't seem to exist. That's because search term 1, which was originally typed in as dot and a bunch of ampersands, it takes the first ampersand and is now after that looking for the next query parameter term, which it's interpreting as a bunch of ampersands followed by search term, which we don't have a matcher for in our JavaScript, so it just can't find a search to term. So there is a way to prevent that. Normally this is good enough. You don't assume that the user is gonna do anything weird like that. But if you really did want to be able to allow the user to type in such things, you can use this encode URI component and then set that to a variable. So we have the user input. We're passing that as an argument to encoded URI component, saving that as a variable called encoded input, and concatenating that into the URL. So let's have a look and see if that actually works. Oh, I should probably reload the page when I'm here and try that again. And now it can actually get what the user typed. It does some encoding. It replaces those ampersands with encoded character schemes, which we won't get into, but that's a way of preventing those weird errors when you're concatenating user input into query parameters. Let's have a little look at how we get the query parameters out of the URL. And so that's handled on the search page.js file. So first off, what I've done is I have console logged window.location.search. So what that does is it basically isolates the query parameters portion of the URL. So when I load the search page, you see that it's console logging the question mark and everything after that. That's a nice thing to have because it can be passed to a new instance of URL search params and then have that instance of URL search params saved as a variable. If you're not familiar with the syntax of using the JavaScript keyword new and creating a new instance of an object, don't worry about it too much. Just know that this is a good way to get your query parameters because then you can just call the .get method, specify the query parameter that you're looking for, and it will take care of all of the decoding for you and all of that. So to go through that again, window.location.search is a raw string of everything, including the question mark in the URL and everything after that. That gets passed to a new instance of URL search params and stored as a variable. That allows us to call .get on any specific query parameter that we want to access, which we can then save as a variable and then use use in this portion of the code where we were simply using them to be displayed by setting the text content of certain headers and including the search term as needed. I had uncommented this method down here, which shows a very raw method of doing it. If you call window.location.href, you get the entire URL from the very beginning. So here that is being saved as a variable, and then we access the params by calling url.split at the question mark. So that splits the URL into two pieces, everything before the question mark and everything after the question mark. And so we're accessing what comes after the question mark by accessing the second index of that now array. And so then we perform more splitting at the equal sign, specifying another index, splitting at the ampersand, specifying another index to extract our search term 1 and our search term 2 from the URL. Yeesh, that's a pretty wild way of having to do it. That's kind of why I recommend this first method. And again, if you're sort of not familiar with instantiating new instances of objects using the new keyword, don't worry about it. The code for this example is in the description, and you can literally just use it as a template. It's a nice way of handling query parameters for the sake of accessing and decoding them, because then you can simply call .get and you don't have to worry about the decoding or anything like that. You'll just have a nice clean string extracted from the query parameters. Okay, so that's the gist of window.location. Basically, if you find yourself in any situation while writing your program where you want to programmatically navigate or programmatically alter or access the URL, window.location is the place to go. So there you have it, folks. Window.location is now a tool in your tool belt, and I hope you find it very useful, and happy coding. Take care, folks.